Thank you so much, Professor, for this interview to the Greek public television. We are here at the Academy of Athens, and you are here for the Aristotle Confucius Symposium. Could the ancient wisdom and the ideas of the two great philosophers of Greece and China help us today to approach global matters?
I think they could. First, each one had a lot of wisdom about their own societies. Aristotle's Politics, I think, is the best book of politics ever written. It was written 2,350 years ago, and it's still the masterpiece. Teaches us about how to make politics for the good of the public. And so Confucius similarly taught about many different aspects of China, but he wanted harmony in society. But another reason for this symposium, obviously, is to bring China and the Western traditions closer together. We are so interconnected now. When Aristotle and Confucius wrote, there was actually, even then, a little bit of trade. But now we're absolutely face to face, and we had better understand each other a lot better, and we had better cooperate more effectively. So that's one of my objectives in this symposium, is much more dialogue, understanding of the cultural traditions, the background, the history, so that we really can cooperate more effectively.
Give us your take on the new world economy, the great challenges, and how these challenges affect Greece and the Greek people.
We're at a time of huge turmoil, a huge disruption. Obviously, we have an ecological disruption. This is clear. We're in the middle of very serious, dangerous, and accelerating human-made environmental catastrophes. Athens knows it almost every year with forest fires and droughts, heat waves. This is happening all over the world. They had to cancel classes in New York City for the young children because the forest fires in Canada were burning so intensively that the air was unbreathable in New York, and the schools were canceled. That's not a 1 in 100 year. This is happening now more and more. So that's number one. Number two, technological acceleration, clearly. Even this year has been the year of ChatGPT, the year of artificial intelligence. When you have the leaders of artificial intelligence themselves saying, whoa, we have to be careful, we should listen to something that they're saying, because this is happening so fast, and we see those technologies going straight from the laboratory into the drones, into the missiles, into the war in Ukraine right now. It's a bit frightening or worse. The third major disruption is we have the end of the Western-led world economy. You know, for most of human history, China, India were a large proportion of the world economy. China was a technological leader for about 1,000 years, from 500 AD to about 1500 AD. In the last 250 years, the West dominated, starting with Britain, which industrialized first. James Watt was British. Britain had coal. Britain made the Industrial Revolution. Britain went and took over much of the rest of the world because of its power. The United States came afterwards, in a way became the American Empire after the British Empire. But this is all changing now, and it's one statistic for me very relevant. If you measure output at international prices, in other words, you use a common standard to measure the output of all countries, the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the 5 BRICS, have a larger output per year now than the G7 countries, the United States, Canada, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. Whoa! The G7 thought, we run the world. The United States thinks it runs the world. But the fact of the matter is now the BRICS are bigger than the G7 in this international price measurement. That is a big deal. And we haven't exactly adapted to it. But geopolitics is changing, and changing in a very dangerous way, in my view, because the U.S. is trying to hold on to its number one position. And it has said, well, we have two competitors. One is Russia, a minor competitor. One is China, a big competitor. The fact of the matter is that whole view is wrong-headed, because if you are out to be number one in the world, you're going to be awfully disappointed in our present world. And a lot of Americans, leaders, are pretty confused about this. It has become common, to use the Greek analogy, to refer to the US-China competition like the Peloponnesian Wars. Are we in the Thucydides trap of Sparta and Athens? But the main thing I keep trying to say in the United States is, in the Peloponnesian Wars, both Athens and Sparta ended up losing. It was so exhausting. And the United States and China need to sit down and talk rather than this kind of conflict. So this is the world economy right now. Huge change, very rapid, a lot of distrust, a lot of broken relations. COVID didn't help. The war in Ukraine is a disaster. The tensions between the US and China are a huge threat to the world. We need to do better than this.
What role Greece could play on this world? Now we have a new government, and Greece is the home of the Western democracy.
Greece, is foundational for Western civilization, and it's quite interesting because, of course, Greece invented many, many things. Periclean democracy, Athenian democracy is one of them. For me, the 4th century of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle is beyond imagining. I rather like the fact that Plato and Aristotle invented the university, invented the research university. This is a great gift to humanity. And what's striking in history, really striking, is that for the roughly 1,600 years or so after the Roman conquest, and then the Western Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, it was still Greece that was the center of learning, it was the academic center of the world, it was the philosophical center of the world. To me, this is, aside from the beauty and wonderful, many things about this country, it is the ongoing gift of Greece. This is the center of our culture and the center of our wisdom, and we need to use that. And so when I have wanted to bring scholars together, Athens, where else? So this is quite straightforward to me. Now, Greece is also, of course, in the center of a really not good ecological change in the Mediterranean, in the Eastern Mediterranean. And at COP27 last year in Sharm el-Sheikh, there was a meeting of the leaders of the region. Prime Minister Mitsotakis participated. It was presided by President El-Sisi. Cyprus had helped to organize the meeting and so on. The idea was regional cooperation to face what is truly a regional challenge. I think this is a tremendous opportunity and need for Greece to say, we're facing this, but it's not just Brussels, actually, because, okay, Brussels, it does some things okay, it's got a lot of Northern Europe in it, but Greece understands this is about the Eastern Mediterranean, this is about North Africa, this is about the Levant, this is about the Middle East. We need a regional focus, and I would like to see Greece help to take the lead on that.
You mentioned about the new world order. I want you to elaborate on this. I have written an article that you wrote recently in the newspaper Καθημερινή about the global challenges and the multipolar system. You argue that the great problem today, the biggest problem and the biggest crisis is geopolitical. On this new world order, You mentioned already the United States, the role of the United States. How do you see the role of the administration in Washington? How do you see the role of China, Russia, Germany, and other big players?
History of the last 250 years misshaped our understanding in a way. It gave the idea that the world is led by the West, naturally. Well, this is completely non-historical. It's a specific moment of history, a rather astounding moment, because the steam engine, mechanization, the factory world, industrialization, the atomic age, this was led by the West. And so the technological impulse was so strong, the dynamism was so strong, the military advantage was so strong that the British Empire ruled the oceans. And then after 2 world wars, at the end of 1945, Britain was exhausted and handed the leadership to the United States, basically, or the US grabbed the baton. And the US thought, now we run the world. After 1991, when the Soviet Union ended, the American mindset was, now we really run the world. No competitors, no nothing, because we had one competitor, the Soviet Union, it doesn't even exist anymore. And they didn't even imagine, if you look back in the early 1990s, China wasn't mentioned. China, that's villages, they grow rice. What do we have to do with that? So they had no idea what was going to happen over the next 30 years, that China was going to have the most phenomenal catching up. And China, by 2010, had developed a real middle-income country. But then China started to innovate. Now, this was something completely unexpected. Starting around 2015, China's suddenly at the frontier of innovation in many, many areas. And then the US policymakers said, wait, that's not in our script. We run the world. What's this China business? This is where the problem lies right now. We don't have an understanding of this. The US still talks about, well, we need a world in which we run the world because of our Western values. Well, China does not want the United States to run the world. China, I believe, wants to cooperate. I do not believe, based on all I know about China and all I know about 2,200 years of Chinese history since the unification of China, that China has any aspiration to go conquer the world or threaten Greece or threaten the United States. I don't believe it at all. It's a long story, but I don't believe it at all. I think we need to learn to live together. Now, if you think about this multipolar order, India is now developing very fast. It's now the most populous country because it overtook, according to the best data we have, China earlier this year. Africa, if you consider it a union rather than 54 separate countries, it's the same population, 1.4 billion, as India and as China. Each one is going to be a center of world polarity of civilization. Latin America, which has been very divided and very unhappy experience, has a lot of people, a huge region, huge resources needed for the world. So I'm looking for a world in which North America, South America, Europe, European Union, African Union, the Arab region, Russia, Central Asia, South Asia, East Asia, actually work within the regions peacefully and cooperate across the regions, rather than all this talk about, will we have a new war between China and the US? Aside from the fact that it would quite possibly end the world, what a waste of time to talk about war when we have climate change to attend to, when we have technological change to attend to, when we have serious work to do for human well-being. What are they talking about? Why are we spending $2.2 trillion on armaments right now? Why is my country, the United States, spending 40% of all the arms purchases in the world, or military spending? We're 40% of the worldwide 2.2 trillion. That is awful, because inside the United States, we've got poverty, we've got falling life expectancy, we've got mass shootings almost every day. So what are they talking about war? How about fixing inside the United States?
How do you see the U.S. strategy towards China?
I think the U.S. strategy towards China is a complete blunder by people who I suspect have never been to China and who know no history. The mindset of the U.S., and when I say the U.S., I mean the security establishment. The mindset of the U.S. security establishment is China's a threat, and we need to make sure that we remain dominant over China. That's quite an idea because China's 4 times larger than the United States. But they got the idea starting around 2015, we need to hinder China's development. They won't put it that way because governments have stories. No, we don't want to hurt you. But what they really want to do is slow China's development. They want to keep high technology away. The Chinese have figured that out, that this is not goodwill. This is not simply about arms, because if it were about armaments, we'd have arms control discussions. This is about competition, who's number one. As an economist, frankly, I don't think in those terms because we want prosperity in both places from my point of view. But if you're a security leader, apparently your biggest thought is who's number one and who's below you, which to my mind is a strange way to think about the world anyway, but that is the mindset. So the U.S. has made many unilateral moves, very strange ideas. President Obama already, and he's one of our more rational leaders, he started negotiations on the Trans-Pacific Partnership with the explicit idea, let's have a trading arrangement in Asia with the United States that doesn't include China. What kind of thinking is that? So I think the U.S. approach has been wrong. And one of the things about Chinese statecraft, just like Confucianism, by the way, Confucian was a lot about ritual and proper relationship. And ritual mattered in that you need to give proper respect.
On China, are you concerned for a possible conflict on the United States relation with China? Emmanuel Macron, the French president, said recently that the Europeans and France should not follow the United States when it comes to Taiwan.
Europe needs a foreign policy. This is no secret. Europe doesn't have a foreign policy right now. Europe has a NATO policy, which means a U.S. policy. Frankly, the Europeans don't care, is the U.S. number one or China number one? It's not the European interest. The idea of this number one is a comic book version of the world. It's not the real version of the world. But the U.S. is actually aiming to implicate Europe in the U.S. contest with China. This is bad for the economy and bad for security of Europe. And even worse, and I resent it also as an American, the U.S. began to invite Asian leaders to NATO. The last time I looked, NATO meant North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It did not mean Pacific, and it should not be involved in Asian affairs. All this does is put Europe deeper and deeper into geopolitical strife that is not Europe's cause, it's not Europe's purpose, it's not Europe's interest.
On the war in Ukraine, you are very critical about the United States foreign policy. You are at the same time critical for the Russian brutal invasion. Do you see any prospects for peace and a way out soon?
If one looks at this conflict objectively, which is very hard to do because we're not getting an objective account, we have an incredible war of attrition and bloodshed in Ukraine, which is first and foremost killing Ukraine. All of this great talk about, oh, we're going to drive Russia out of, every inch, including Crimea and so forth, never made any sense, never had any truth to it, was guaranteed to put Ukraine into violence, war, and bloodshed for years to come. And frankly, at age 68 as I am, and I've lived through Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, the Contra Wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Serbia, and now Ukraine. Enough. Go sit and negotiate. That's my feeling.
In the United States, next year in 2024, we're going to have presidential elections. It seems that so far we're going to have the main candidates are President Biden, who is going to be next year 82. He does a good job right now at the White House, but he's going to be 82. And on the Republican side, Donald Trump. We all know Donald Trump, and we experienced his presidency. How come the American system cannot have another dynamic leader, another dynamic candidate that could inspire people in the world?
I think there's a very sad truth right now about the United States, which friends of the United States don't want to hear, but it's true, and that is we have been unable to solve internal problems in the U.S. for decades now. We can't get agreement on anything. We can't get agreement on taking care of our kids. We can't get agreement on guns. We can't get agreement on any issue at all. Our politics is wrecked. It was wrecked actually by corruption, first and foremost by big money, because next year's presidential campaign will probably spend $15 billion at least. So you see all these billionaires lining up. Well, I'll give this one to the Democrats, this one to the Republicans, but they're billionaires. What do they want? They want low taxes and no environmental regulation. So the general problem in the United States is the political system is generally dysfunctional and corrupted. Biden, in my opinion, has no business running again. I'm sorry. An 81-year-old who will be 82 and 86 if he were to be reelected, and he's not in great shape, in my view. I'm no doctor or expert, but I'm watching him. Retire. Thank you very much. Time to move on. Let a new generation come in. And Trump will have so many lawsuits by the time this thing comes. It's stunning how sad this is. So I believe that one other experience of American presidential politics is you never know if you have two lead candidates, one of whom is being indicted left and right, and the other is really fumbling physically right now in many different contexts. I think we have to wait and see who the real candidates are going to be next year. But in any event, the whole system is not working well, and unfortunately the U.S. Has been unable to sit down and discuss internally how we make our politics work better.
Mm-hmm. Finally, some experts on global challenges include the use of technologies, new technologies, the AI, that might disrupt the world if are not these technologies properly used. Are you concerned?
We should really be concerned. First, amazed is number one. Second, in many ways admiring. But then third, deeply concerned about the technological revolutions underway. It's not only AI, it's science, and even more than science, technology has exploded in all sorts of advances. You can see in the Ukraine war every day, this is not a war even like you would have seen a year or 2 or 3 years ago, but it's across society right now, whether it's computation, whether it's connectivity, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's robotics, whether it's advanced biotechnology, and on and on. So you realize these technologies are out of control. Some people want to make trillions of dollars out of them. Some people want to blow up the world with them. Some people want to make biowarfare with them. Nobody can govern them. And this is a huge problem. And the problems are three. One, almost nobody understands what's going on. If we're not technically led through this, and it took me months to really understand a lot of this, and I was working real hard at it. It's very hard, so very concentrated knowledge. Second problem is power coming from this. Knowledge is power, said Francis Bacon in 1605. Whether it's military power, financial power, they don't want to tell us what's going on. They've got the power. And the third problem, and it's related to this, at least in the US context, all serious governance is secret right now. So to come back to Greek democracy, you know, the Athenians went to the Agora or went to the Acropolis or went to the assembly, and they heard the arguments. People discussed them. Pericles gave his lectures. Didn't always work out perfectly, but things were discussed. In America right now, almost nothing is discussed. We have narrative, we don't have deliberation. Narrative is what the government wants us to believe, and the New York Times, I'm afraid, or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal prints with unnamed senior officials. I happen to be, because of my jobs and role in life, I happen to be privy to a lot more discussion than you can find in the media. They're lying all the time. I don't like that, because how are we going to have a democracy if it's not based on transparency and truth?
Thank you so much, Professor.
Good to be with you.